Whoa, what is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video as we're starting to get at least some information on the Daniel Jones situation. Just yesterday, reportedly, Daniel Jones switched agencies in terms of who represents him when dealing with these contract negotiations with the New York Giants. The agency that he switched to, I believe it's called Athletes First. I could be wrong on that. But regardless, the agency that he switched to represents quarterbacks that have signed record-breaking contracts, such as Aaron Rodgers, Dak Prescott, a number of others. I can't remember. Maybe Justin Herbert's on there as well. There's some big-name quarterbacks on that list that this agency represents. But by the same token, the agency that he left has big-name quarterbacks as well. Guys like Josh Allen, guys like Joe Burrow. And it's up for interpretation. It's up for speculation as to why Daniel Jones made this change. I think there's two areas in which it could have, as to why this may have been. And we'll talk about what Mike Florio had to say about NBC Sports. I'll give my whole opinion on the entire situation. But it's one of two reasons why Daniel Jones would have made a change this late in the process with his agency when we have contract negotiations coming up fast, right? The deadline, I think, to tag players is about a week before free agency, like March 7th, March 8th. The New York Giants will have to come to the determination of whether or not they're going to franchise tag Daniel Jones. And you have to figure if the Giants want to bring Daniel Jones back and not have the fear of other teams being able to drive up the price around March 15th, the Giants are going to franchise tag him and then try to work out a deal before the year starts. That is what I've always thought the New York Giants plan would be if Daniel Jones and his agent came in with high contract demands. By no means am I faulting Daniel Jones for that. We'll talk about more of that throughout the video, but you also have to take into account the perspective from Joe Schoen. Joe Schoen's job as a general manager is to get players back as cheaply as he possibly can. That's what good general managers do, and hopefully they could reach some middle ground. I've always thought that people that say $25 million a year, even $30 million a year, is a pipe dream for the simple reason that the franchise tag is $32.4 million a year. We'll pull up the quarterback market, and I'll talk about where I personally think Daniel Jones falls currently in this market, this ever-increasing market. You also have to factor that in because the cap goes up by approximately 10% every year. So $30 million a year, just giving you a number, would be worth $33 million a year next year. And the agents know this. The quarterbacks know this. It's why quarterbacks break records and wide receivers break records and NFL players break records every offseason. And every offseason, we look at a player's contract and we say, oh, my God, how did they sign him for that amount of money? Now, am I co-signing Daniel Jones being signed to a $45 million a year contract? I am not. We'll talk about what Florio had to say. But, yeah, quickly, before we get into the rest of the video, no, I do not want to have to sign Daniel Jones right now, at least, to a $45 million a year type contract. Do I blame Daniel Jones for trying to get that amount of money? No. If I were him, I'd try to shoot for the moon and the stars. And I think you have to also wait to see what Derek Carr signs for. Because say the New York Jets give Derek Carr $45 million a year. If you're Daniel Jones, why wouldn't you try to get $45 million a year? After all, you're younger. I personally think he has more upside, but you may not if you're watching this video. He's 7 years younger, and I think last year it's really not a debate. He's coming off a better year in which Derek Carr did. So, I think you got to wait to see what a lot of these quarterbacks sign for before coming to the conclusion as to what Daniel Jones should at least feel what his market ultimately is. We'll wait to see how it all plays out. But, yeah, in an ideal world, would I like to have Daniel Jones back on 3 years, $75 million? Of course. It gives you more money to be able to bring back other players on your roster. But you got to realize that quarterbacks are valuable. There's only 32 of them, and there's only about 15 to 20 of them that are worthy of being starters in the NFL. It's why only about 15 or 20 of them get paid the amount of money that Daniel Jones is looking to get paid in free agency. And I think last year Daniel Jones proved to be worthy of being a starting quarterback in the NFL and being paid as a starting quarterback in the NFL. But we'll talk about all of it throughout this video. First, we're going to pull up some notes and quotes about the entire situation with Daniel Jones from Mike Florio. Let me pull up these quotes real quick. Should have had it prepared before I was going to pull it up. But here's the first quote I wanted to pull up for you guys. So what does Jones want? There are two possibilities. One, he's willing to do a deal for less than the CAA was willing to accept. Two, he wants more than the CAA was able to get. And I meant to make that point earlier. People are speculating that this means Daniel Jones is trying to drive up the price. It's very possible that is the case. It's possible that the New York Giants came in way too low for what he thinks he is worth, and he's switching agencies to try to get a deal done. The other school of thought is Daniel Jones is not happy with his representation. He's not happy with his agents. He's not happy that this contract is drawing out And he wants to get this deal done as quickly as possible. And he thinks by switching agencies, he'll be able to get a deal done that is agreed upon on both sides of the spectrum. You can have your opinion, and we won't know until this plays out. We're going to get our answer very shortly as to, when we see what Daniel Jones signs for, whether it's a franchise tag, whether it's a multi-year deal, whether or not the New York Giants let him walk. And we're going to get our answer very soon, so there's no point in guessing anymore. I think by March 15th, free agency starts, so you're going to know within less than a month whether or not whether or not Daniel Jones will be remaining on with the New York Giants and how long he is projected to remain on for. As one source explained it, it's the latter. This is a source. Who the source is, I don't know. Mike Florio's not really releasing the source. Jones wants more than the Giants have offered, possibly as much as $45 million per year or more. Then he went on to say this. Per a source with knowledge of the situation, the NFL's in-house database lists athletes first as the representatives for Jones. Some quarterbacks, as I mentioned earlier, Dak Prescott, Aaron Rodgers. The NFL Players Association currently shows that Jones has no agent. That could be updated as soon as Monday. Typically, a player who terminates his representation must wait 5 days before signing with a new firm. CAA, we're told, waived the 5-day period as per Jones. So if that's accurate, that means they could start negotiations right now. And it's possible Joe Schoen and his representation weren't getting along. Entirely possible that Joe Schoen and his representation weren't getting along. And we'll see. I think Joe Schoen is going to have a walkaway price. Why? Because he's a responsible general manager. He's not going to just give him the moon and the stars when he has tools such as a franchise tag at his disposal to talk to Daniel Jones exclusively. But I'll talk about all of that throughout the video. This is currently the quarterback market. You might not be able to see that. I've talked about this in prior videos. And I want you to remember, the market continuously goes up. So let's say the New York Giants signed Daniel Jones to $37 million a year, $35 to $37 million a year. That's where I currently have him at in terms of where I value him. Would I be upset if they gave him 40? I mean, it wouldn't be ideal. I'm not rooting for that. But I definitely don't fault Daniel Jones and his representation for trying to get that. But if they sign him to a $37 million a year contract, a lot of people look at this list and they'll say, the 9th highest paid quarterback. And a lot of people say, well, he's not worth that. I personally think last year he was at least a borderline top 10 quarterback. I think he had a very good year. But when you're negotiating these contracts, as Saquon Barkley has talked about in the past, you're looking at the totality. And over the course of his career, as Daniel Jones over 4 years, even though a lot of it's out of his control, which we all recognize, worthy of being paid as a top 8, 9 quarterback in the league. And I certainly understand backlash from fans when they say, no, he's not. But the counter argument to that is if he signed a $37 million a year contract, that wouldn't put him currently as the 9th highest paid quarterback. But that's without factoring in pending extensions from guys like Geno Smith, who could potentially make more than that coming off the year he's coming off of, Derek Carr, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson. And there's a guy like Tua Tagovailoa potentially. So, yeah, he may be the day he signs that contract, he might be, if he signed a $37 million, $38 million a year contract, he may be the 9th highest paid quarterback in the NFL today. By the time the year starts, he'd probably be 12th, 13th. By the time the year starts in 2024, he'd probably be 16th, 17th. And Jones and his representation knows this. It's an ever-growing market. What would I do if I was Joe Schoen? I've talked about this during this entire process. If the Giants can get a deal done that they think is fair on their side, which I think is around that $35 to $37 million area on a per-year basis, I would try to get it as close to that franchise tag number on a 4-year contract as I possibly could if I was Schoen. That would be my goal. And this is just me speaking as a fan. I'm not an agent. I'm not a general manager. It's just my opinion. But I think that $35 to $37, $38 million area is where I, as a fan, currently would value Daniel Jones based off of all the things that I discussed. I would not want to exceed that number. And the fact that I have the franchise tag at my disposal, I could use that as a tool to not allow other teams to negotiate with him. So if Jones and his representation is willing to sign 4 years, $140 million, which is $35 million a year on average, say $80 million guaranteed, I'll sign that deal right now, personally, if I was Joe Schoen. But if he's coming in with what Mike Florio is reporting, $45 million a year, which is $180 million over 4 years, or $225 million over 5 years, I'm using the franchise tag. I'm going to say, Daniel, I'm going to tag you. We don't want you to play on the tag. We want to get a deal done. We want to give you more long-term security because there is a negative for the Giants to playing him on the tag. Yes, obviously the pro is it's a shorter commitment. If Daniel Jones does not continue to grow, does not continue to progress, if the team plummets next year and you have a top 7-8 pick, you're in the market to take a quarterback, and you can move up with Daniel Jones easily. It's a 1-year commitment. The negative is you can't move that space around at all. If you sign him to a 4 or 5-year deal, you can move the money around, and you don't have to put $32.4 million against this year's cap, which would allow you to bring back player potentially, if you want to, bring back a player like Saquon Barkley. If you're not bringing back Barkley, maybe it allows you the freedom to trade for a wide receiver or sign a wide receiver or sign a linebacker, right? It gives you the ability to improve your roster further in 2023. If you have to fully commit $32.4 million to Daniel Jones, it's going to hurt the Giants this year. It just is. It's going to give you probably 15 or 16 less million dollars in cap space this year to build this team. Because if you give him a $35 million, $37 million a year contract with guarantees and the way that you could structure it, he probably would only go 14, 15, $16 million against the cap this year. So that's the benefit to giving him the 4 or 5 year deal. And I think that's what the ultimate goal will be. But it may first come down to having to franchise tag Daniel Jones if he's not willing to come off of it. And this was always something that I looked at as a very realistic possibility. It's why I think they went to Saquon Barkley first. People talked about in season during the bye that, they have no interest in Daniel Jones. And I've talked about this before. No, I think it was that they didn't want to have to use the tag on Barkley so they could at least have that as a tool if Daniel Jones came in with this reported asking price. I don't think Joe Schoen wants to bend over backwards and give him $45 million a year. I also think he wants him back. And I think he wants to meet him in the middle. A lot of people are going to point to the fact that, this all could have been avoided had they signed him on the 5th-year option before the year started. And that's a fair proposition. But let me ask you this. I think it would have been $22.5 million a year. If Daniel Jones is coming in, if this is true, with an asking price around $40 to $45 million, you don't think he would have threatened to hold out on $22 million a year? It made all the sense in the world for Joe Schoen to play the year out due to several factors. The fact that Daniel Jones was coming off the injury, the fact that he never drafted Daniel Jones in the first place, the fact that the production was not there. He analyzed Jones for a year, seemingly has liked Jones, and wants him back for what he feels is a fair price. I think when Joe Schoen had his press conference at the end of the year, when he said twice that Daniel Jones will be back, I think that was a message to his representation. We're going to tag him if you're not willing to, meet us in the middle. I don't think Joe Schoen is going to get bullied into a $45 million a year contract. I also don't think he's going to just let Daniel Jones walk out the door. In the end, I think Jones will probably be tagged. I'm hoping not. I hope it's for a $35 to $37, $38 million a year, 3 or 4 year deal. A deal that you could get out of after 2 or 3 years, or you could rip up the contract and give him a bigger contract if he continues to progress as a quarterback. At the end of the day, the best case scenario for the New York Giants is Daniel Jones continues to evolve, continues to progress, and we don't need to draft a quarterback. That's ideal for me. I want him to become the franchise quarterback. But if you're Joe Schoen, I think you need to see more evidence before you're willing to go head over heels in love with him. If you were to give him $45 million a year, if you look at this chart, $45 million a year would make him on par with Pat Mahomes on a per year average. You'd have Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, who's vastly overpaid, Kyler Murray at 46, Watson, and Pat Mahomes above Josh Allen. And I understand it's 2 more years in the future, so on and so forth. But if you're Joe Schoen, why would you not use the franchise tag at your disposal? It takes away a lot of the power from Daniel Jones and his representation. And at that point, Daniel Jones has to say to himself, do I want to play on $32.4 million a year fully guaranteed? Or maybe I want to take $36 million a year on average, $35, $36 million a year on average, where say 80, 90 million is guaranteed. I don't know if I'm going to get hurt. I don't know if I may regress in play. And Daniel Jones may say to himself, all right, I'll play on the tag. He might do what Kirk Cousins did. I'll gamble and see if I could get even better off of last year. And then the Giants have the choice to either tag me again at $38 million a year or pay me what is an increased salary. Because at the end of the day, like I said at the top of the video, $30 million today is worth $33 million in 2024. $35 million today is worth $39 million in 2024. So if you feel Daniel Jones' fair market is 35 to 37 now, next year it will be 40. And if you're Daniel Jones, you may say to yourself, no, I believe in myself. Year 2 in the scheme, I can get the money that I want. I may just have to wait a year and play a year on the tag. So that will be the discussion. But I don't think Joe Schoen is just going to bend over backwards. Worst case scenario, he's going to make Daniel Jones prove himself. Of course, also, if you're Daniel Jones, you have to think of it from the standpoint of, if I do go that route, I may lose Saquon Barkley. And if Daniel Jones' long-term interest is to be a franchise quarterback, I think his best route is with the New York Giants, with Brian Daboll, with an offense he's familiar with. So I think he needs to factor that in as well. And if he signs for the franchise tag, it's not going to enable Joe Schoen to give him as good of a team as he possibly can for 2023. So that, I think, is the dilemma that Daniel Jones may be presented with. In the end, if you're asking me to predict what's going to happen, I don't think the Giants are going to give him $45 million a year. I think in the end, if that is what they are demanding, and that is just reported, I think they will tag him. But I think they will tag him with the intention that they want to sign him to a multi-year extension before the year starts. If Daniel Jones and his representation is willing to meet in that projected range that I gave, 35, 36, 37, 38, hell, maybe 40. I don't want to go that high. Then hopefully they get something done. I'm hoping it's in that $35 million range. But I don't think the Giants are going to be bullied into giving him a $45 million a year contract when they know they could tag him and take away some of his power. Because if they just let him hit free agency, you don't know what these teams are going to be willing to give him, right? We could all say, oh, there's no chance. But there's about 12, 15 teams in the NFL right now that need a quarterback. And Daniel Jones is still 25 years old, and Daniel Jones is still growing. And it only takes one team to say to themselves, yeah, he's worth $45 million a year. And Daniel Jones and his representation knows that. They absolutely know that, which is why they're going to try to get as much as they possibly can. And this is going to be a struggle back and forth. Unfortunately, the NFL is a business. As a fan, you're hoping that Joe Schoen wins that. As much as I like Daniel Jones, he's a great guy. And I'm not going to fault Daniel Jones for getting as much money as he possibly can. I want to reiterate that. Daniel Jones, since he's gotten here, has been provided with nothing. His best wide receiver has been Golden Tate at the ripe old age of like 32, right? He's had countless offensive coordinators. He's had 3 different head coaches. He's had 2 different general managers. So he's been battered. Our owner has self-admittedly said that they've destroyed Daniel Jones' possibility of growing into a quarterback. So if you're DJ, what do you owe the New York Giants? Of course, if I'm DJ, I'm going to try to get as much as I possibly can. But I think he also has to think about his best long-term interest. We'll see how it all plays out. I think they're going to tag him when push comes to shove, and I do think they'll get some kind of deal done before the year starts. I don't think it'll be $45 million a year. As always, guys, if you like what you watch, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.